Today's 16-bit superhero game is a Super Nintendo title that came out in 1992. It's called Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge, and this game also was ported to the Sega Genesis a year later. I don't have that version, so I'm only going to talk about the Super Nintendo game. I don't know if I really want to also pick up the Genesis version of the game. It's not to say that this is a bad title. I actually think it's got a quirky charm. In the first level, Spider-Man's got to go and collect all of these different bombs, which are really poorly rendered, by the way. They just look like something like a plumber might have dropped or something. You have no idea what's going on there. It took me a couple of minutes to figure out, oh, those little things with the blinking light inside, those are the bombs. And so Spider-Man, he defuses all the bombs, and then he gets into the next level, and then he realizes that this character named Arcade has created a video game called Murder World, and he's sucked all of the X-Men into this game, and it's all broken up in different kinds of video game-like levels, which is very interesting. So you've got, Cyclops and Gambit and Wolverine and Storm, and then Spider-Man as well, and every one of the characters gets a couple of different levels, which is pretty ambitious. You can go to Cyclops, which lets you go through these tunnels, and you've got all of these different creatures that are shooting at you. You've got these tracks carrying these mine carts along, and every once in a while there'll be bombs on the tracks which will blow you up and frustrate you. If you hit the tracks, of course you will get zapped and die right away. The game is pretty cheap. There's a lot of cheap deaths in there. So if you want to bounce from Cyclops, you can try Gambit for a while, and Gambit hucks his cards and takes out bad guys that are also inside of another cave, and there's creepy crawlies and stuff in there, and also lots of things to fall on and die in there. It is also quite cheap and quite easy to die in the Gambit stages. Storm is a very weird decision where she's underwater and she's losing air. Consequently, you're trying to go through this really unclear maze of what part of the background you can pass through and what part you can't. And so you're swimming around and your air bubbles are going down and you're shooting at stuff that will, explode with a little POW symbol and stuff. But it's not clear. Consequently, it just feels kind of clumsy, like you're stumbling and bumbling around and you don't know what you got to do and where you got to go, and you don't know why Storm is in the water. It's all just so weird. Why didn't they throw Submariner in there to make things a little bit more interesting? So the Storm levels I thought were a pretty abysmal failure, and I didn't even really want to play those. Now Wolverine stuff is kind of interesting because you're in this overgrown toy factory kind of deal where all of the toys are out to kill you. So you got Jack-in-the-Boxes with machine guns, and you got all these little toy soldiers that are coming at you, and they're trying to get you with bayonets, and little toy planes will drop toy bombs on you. Very deadly. I actually thought that was kind of interesting and fun. It reminded me a little bit of the overgrown toy stuff that we saw in The Adventures of Batman and Robin. And I thought about it. I feel like there's overgrown toy levels in tons of 16-bit platforming action-adventure games out there. I guess developers just were thinking about how fun it would be to be shrunken down. I guess this was the era of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or something. Lots of games have this challenge of toys out to kill you, and this one does too, except in this one, you get Wolverine's claws, and you can stab everything. Which is pretty effective. I felt like I had a little bit more balance, a little bit more fun playing as Wolverine than in some of the other levels, which had a lot of cheap deaths. And then Spider-Man also continues on in his adventure in New York, and eventually you will fight Arcade and defeat him. Now, as you probably have guessed, I found this game incredibly frustrating. It's very cheap, and you don't get a lot of lives to start out with. There's no options. You basically start the game, and good luck. I like the breakout structure of it. I like that there's all of these characters interwoven, and they have their own kind of identity as a character, but also per the level that you get to play. I thought that was interesting. One thing that you definitely notice right away is all the sprites are really itty-bitty. They're all super tiny and a little chunky and a little blocky, but they still work and they still kind of move, and they have the weaponry and the attacks that you would expect with each of these characters. Overall, aesthetically, I thought this was quite a pleasing little foray, you know? It certainly feels generic, and in the case of the Storm stuff, misguided, but you know, I still dug it, and I still wanted to stay with it, but I did find it way too cheap to have a really good time with it. I just didn't feel like it was designed in a way to make you feel great about beating the game. It felt like it was too heavy-handed with the cheap deaths and the easy ways to kind of restart everything again. So as much as I can appreciate all of the, you know, artistic choices and the ambition of putting all of these different characters and environments into this title, it did leave me feeling a little bit frustrated and a little bit flat. And I've played so many of these 16-bit games now that I know which are the best superhero titles to lean towards, and this one unfortunately isn't it. It's not terrible though. It's not my favorite of the 16-bit superhero titles that I've played so far, and I'm reviewing all of these games as I'm playing them now, not as, you know, I have fond memories of them or something like that, and I didn't play this back in the day. I'm going to give Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge a 6.5 out of 10.